Welcome to the deep dive. You know, usually when a massive television series wraps up its final season, there is this unspoken contract with the audience.
Right, that you're gonna get a grand explosion.
Exactly. We expect a fireworks display. We want the biggest, loudest, most city-leveling spectacle imaginable, and we want to just sit back and watch the sky light up with CGI destruction.
Oh, totally, it's the standard superhero formula.
Yeah. But then you step into the finale of The Boys, the episode titled Blood and Bone, and the creators simply, well, they refuse to light the fuse.
They really do.
Instead of a fireworks display, you are locked in a tiny room with a pressure cooker that is just screaming, waiting for the lid to blow off.
That's a great way to put it, because unlike a firework that just dissipates into the sky, a pressure cooker traps all that heat.
Right, it forces all the ingredients, or in this case, characters who absolutely despise each other, to boil together until they just fundamentally break down.
It is the absolute definition of narrative claustrophobia. And that trapped heat, that deliberate lack of a massive apocalyptic freakout is exactly why the internet is currently losing its collective mind.
Seriously, the backlash is deafening right now.
It really is. If
Right.
you look at the passionate commentary, the critical reviews, the fan analyses flooding the forums, it's wild. But, when you actually break down the mechanics of what happens in Blood and Bone, the execution is incredibly precise.
It is. And look, if you were one of the fans screaming at your television when the finale faded to black, feeling completely cheated out of a massive Avengers-level battle, you certainly aren't alone.
Not at all.
Today, we are going inside that backlash. We're going to explore why the loudest voices online might actually be missing the thematic triumphs of this ending. We'll look at the brutal realities of modern TV production, how a devastating real-world tragedy reshaped the spin-off Gen V, and why this universe is destined to become a generational touchstone. Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
So let's start with the sheer scale of this finale because, man, the expectations were sky high.
They were. And the core criticism from fans revolves entirely around this deficit of spectacle.
Right.
I mean, after 5 seasons of escalating tension, the audience wanted Homelander to finally snap in a way that leveled cities. They wanted skyscrapers crumbling into dust.
Armies clashing in the streets, all of that.
Exactly. But what they actually got was a heavily budgeted, slightly scorched Oval Office, where, as one of our sources pointed out with brutal honesty, Kimiko's Supe Blaster 9000 light beam didn't even singe the carpet.
Oh, wow. Yeah, the physical space of that climax was remarkably tiny.
It really was.
But, keeping the climax that confined is exactly what forces these characters to finally face each other. They can't just throw CGI buildings at one another to avoid dealing with their trauma.
That's spot on.
And that emotional reality peaks with Homelander. Stripping him of his powers before his death is, it's so much more profound than just hitting him with a bigger laser.
Oh, without a doubt. For 5 seasons, this guy's deepest, darkest psychological fear hasn't been death.
No, it's been the fear of being ordinary.
Exactly. The fear of being vulnerable and ultimately unloved. Stripping away his godhood realizes that ultimate fear. It isn't just a physical defeat. It is inescapable cosmic justice.
Yeah. And you can see that justice play out in Anthony Starr's performance.
He is incredible.
He's played Homelander as this untouchable, arrogant deity for years. And the moment the powers are gone, his entire physical posture just collapses.
He shifts instantly into this vulnerable, whimpering child.
Right.
And the poetic justice continues with his executioner. He isn't taken out by a nuclear blast. He meets his end at the hands of Billy Butcher, wielding a bloody crowbar.
A tool you can buy at literally any hardware store.
Exactly.
If you take a god and make him mortal, killing him with a laser isn't poetry. Beating him to death with a crowbar is.
It's so visceral.
But the brilliance of the writing here isn't just about Homelander's demise. It's about Butcher's internal war. Like, the show could have leaned into pure cynicism and had Butcher just mercilessly cave his skull in.
Totally consumed by the monster he swore to destroy.
Right. But Butcher actually stays his hand.
He holds back out of love. He looked at Huey, he thinks of his brother Lenny, and he realizes that taking that final swing will permanently extinguish whatever shred of humanity he has left.
Which forces Huey to be the one to deliver the final, merciful blow.
Yeah, which anchors the entire series back to the central tragedy of its very first episode.
Oh, that's such a good point. Huey started this series completely powerless, traumatized, terrified of these super beings.
And now, at the very end of the line, he's the one holding the ultimate power of mercy and judgment over Butcher and the legacy of Homelander. It is a devastatingly perfect closed loop.
It really is. And of course, because it wouldn't be The Boys without some pitch black humor sprinkled into all that trauma, we still get these wildly absurd character exits.
Oh, the exits are hilarious.
Right. You've got Ashley using that indestructible ball gag she gifted O-Father to accidentally cause his head to explode during the chaos.
Insane.
And Sage's exit might be the most perfectly in-character escape on television.
She deliberately lets Kimiko trigger her powers to depower her, simply so she can wash her hands of Vought's corporate drama, grab her bag, and go to Universal Studios.
She literally treats the apocalypse like clocking out of a bad retail shift.
It gives these characters a definitive poetic send-off, literally set to the tune of Billy Joel's Piano Man, mind you, while acknowledging that the world around them stays just as messy and broken as they left it.
It's so good. But despite all this thematic payoff, the internet is still hammering the ending.
Yeah, they really are.
And the absolute most common shorthand we are seeing everywhere in these sources is fans comparing this to Game of Thrones Season 8.
Oh, of course.
It's become the universal internet metric for a disastrous, rushed finale.
It's the go-to comparison, but
Yeah.
it completely falls apart the moment you examine the adaptational strategy behind both shows.
How so?
Well, the fundamental issue with Game of Thrones was a literal narrative vacuum. David Benioff and D.B. Weiss ran out of George R.R. Martin's books. They were forced to build the tracks while the trains...
While the train was moving at full speed.
Exactly, which led to a frantic, illogical scramble. The ancient threat of the White Walkers was dealt with in a single night. Jon Snow was exiled right back to where he started.
Rendering the whole resurrection pointless.
Right. And they set up this bizarre elective monarchy based on the logic of who has the best story.
Yeah, they were flying blind. But Eric Kripke, the showrunner for The Boys, was never flying blind. He had Garth Ennis's completed 72-issue comic run sitting on his desk from day one.
He had a complete map of the territory.
He knew exactly where the finish line was. But actually, I need to push back on that idea for a second.
Okay, go for it.
Because if Kripke had this comprehensive map, he completely ignored the biggest landmarks on it. I mean, looking at the lore differences between the comic and the show, they are staggering.
They are pretty massive, yeah.
Take Black Noir. In the comics, the big twist is that Black Noir is actually a Homelander clone created as a failsafe by Vought. And he's the one who committed all the worst atrocities to gaslight Homelander into going insane.
Right.
But in the show, Black Noir is just this revolving door of replacement actors functioning as a running gag about corporate branding.
The lore shifts are undeniable.
And the power dynamics are entirely different, too. In the comics, the boys take Compound V regularly right from the start. They literally punch holes through Supers in issue 1.
Yeah, they're super powered out the gate.
Right. But in the show, they spend seasons relying on blackmail, wits, and CIA backing. Temp V is only introduced way later as this desperate, dangerous addiction that gives them brain tumors. Even Butcher's morality is flipped. In the comics, Butcher goes full villain at the end and slaughters his own team to enact a global genocide. So, if Kripke changed the villains, the power mechanics, and the ultimate moral alignment of the main character, doesn't that defeat the entire purpose of having a map in the first place?
That is the crux of the adaptation argument right there. And what's fascinating here is it brings up a crucial realization about how television works.
Okay.
Kripke didn't use the comic as a plot map. He used it as a thematic map.
Oh, interesting.
He changed massive chunks of the literal lore to fit the medium of TV, but he kept the thematic pillars rock solid. He didn't have to guess how a war between an unhinged, corporately sponsored god and a dying, vengeful man should end, because he understood the emotional endpoints.
So you're saying that by completely changing the literal events, he actually managed to make the themes land harder for a viewing audience?
Precisely.
Yeah.
If Butcher had gone full villain and slaughtered Huey and the team on screen, it would have been a profoundly cynical, hollow viewing experience.
Yeah, that would be rough.
Right. It works in a subversive, edgy comic book from the mid-2000s, but television requires a different kind of emotional investment. Butcher retaining a shred of his humanity and Huey delivering that final blow of mercy is a far more tragic, poetic end.
It closes the loop.
Exactly. The map allowed Kripke to construct a closed-loop resolution for the characters' souls, even if their actions were totally different from the source material. That is a luxury Game of Thrones entirely lacked.
That makes a lot of sense. Thematic mapping is more important than plot mapping. But, even with a clear thematic destination, we have to talk about the physical road they took to get there.
Oh, the pacing.
Yeah. Because looking at our sources, the structural choices of this finale seem heavily, almost violently dictated by real-world constraints. You look at the pacing and you realize they were trapped by the 8-episode streaming model.
It is the brutal reality of the modern streaming straitjacket.
Just imagine trying to pack an old-school 22-episode cable season arc into just 8 hours of television. The narrative checklist Kripke had to hit in this final season is practically a logistical nightmare.
It's massive.
He had to resolve Victoria Neumann's political arc. He had to conclude Ryan's emotional tug-of-war between Homelander and Butcher. He had to provide endings for Huey, Annie, Kimiko, Frenchie, and M.
Don't forget the TemV tumors.
Right. The tumors actively killing Butcher, A&D, who had to stage the final confrontation with Homelander. All of that crammed into 8 episodes.
And this is where the financial contrast with Game of Thrones becomes vital to understand the creative decisions.
How so?
By its final season, Game of Thrones was a global flagship property. They were pulling in unprecedented funding, staging multi-week night shoots with hundreds of extras for the Battle of Winterfell.
Right, huge budget.
The Boys is a massively successful show, but it operated under much tighter budget constraints. Kripke couldn't realistically stage a city-level war involving dozens of powered individuals without the CGI looking incredibly cheap.
So it feels like Kripke was forced into a corner. He couldn't afford a CGI city-leveling war, so he trapped everyone in that Oval Office.
Exactly.
It's almost like the financial budget actively dictated the thematic claustrophobia we were talking about earlier. Instead of bad green screen destruction, he hyper-focused on dialogue, micro-expressions, and that signature practical gore.
Which works so much better for this show anyway.
It does, but this raises a major question for you as a listener. Does understanding this 8-episode straitjacket let the creators off the hook for what feels like a rushed pace? Or should we demand that streaming services actually give complex finales the 10 or 12 episodes they need to breathe?
Well, it forces us to examine our relationship with media consumption, Having
Yeah.
empathy for the human logistical and financial side of TV production changes how you view a finale.
That's true.
Wrapping up a massive ensemble show with a dozen intersecting character arcs in 8 hours is incredibly difficult. And frankly, considering those constraints, Blood and Bone was a masterclass in narrative condensation. It didn't meander.
Yeah.
Every single scene had to serve 2 or 3 narrative purposes simultaneously.
And brilliantly, the show uses those exact corporate limitations to reinforce its most cynical underlying theme. The finale leaves Vought International entirely intact.
Of course it does.
Stan Edgar is back at the helm. Soldier Boy is put on ice for future use. It gives off this undeniably corporate vibe of, thank you for watching, please make sure to tune in to our upcoming spin-off Vought Rising.
Which is so funny.
But thematically, it works flawlessly.
Because the ultimate truth of the universe Kripke built is that you can kill the monsters, but you cannot kill the corporate infrastructure that mass produces them. The board members will always survive the apocalypse.